Ted Bundy's neighbors described him as charming and polite. John Wayne Gacy threw neighborhood parties for children. Jeffrey Dahmer's coworkers said he was quiet and kept to himself. Every single one of them looked completely normal. And, that is the most terrifying thing about what we're going to discuss today, because the warning signs were always there, every single time. And today, FBI behavioral science is going to show you exactly what those signs looked like long before anyone recognized them for what they were. Welcome to this explainer.
Think about it for a second. When we hear the word monster, what pops into our heads? Usually, it's this obvious villain, right? Someone who immediately stands out in a crowd as a clear, glaring threat. But here's the reality. The most dangerous people in human history, they didn't lurk in dark alleyways. They lived right next door.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this right here is the ultimate paradox that behavioral scientists had to untangle. On the outside, you've got these polite, quiet coworkers. You've got the friendly, waving neighbors. But on the inside, deeply damaged minds hiding these escalating, truly terrifying behavioral patterns. Understanding what was actually happening inside their heads isn't just fascinating, it's absolutely crucial. It's honestly one of the most important things we can learn about human psychology.
So today, we're mapping out the psychological evolution of violent offenders across 5 distinct stages. We're going to trace this path step by step, starting with early trauma and the dark triad, then the death of empathy, retreat into fantasy, the mask of sanity, and finally, the cycle of violence. All right, stage 1, early trauma and the dark triad, the root.
Early on, researchers identified something known as the McDonald triad. And it's important to understand, these aren't just your run-of-the-mill instances of kids acting out, not at all. These are 3 highly specific, severe, early warning signals of a mind that has been deeply damaged by trauma, neglect, or abuse. They are literal red flags, showing us that a child has started processing profound damage in ways that are guaranteed to escalate if no one steps in.
Now, what's really interesting about this triad is what it actually consists of. Persistent deadwetting past the age of 12, a deep fascination with setting fires, and deliberate cruelty to animals. And guys, this isn't just some abstract theory. If you look at the documented childhood histories of notorious killers like Dennis Rader, the BTK Strangler, or David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, you'll see it. This exact terrifying combination showed up early in their lives. It was signaling a massive psychological rupture before anything else ever happened.
Which brings us to stage 2, the death of empathy, the consequence. Here's the thing about empathy. It's not just something we're magically born with fully formed. It actually develops through safe, consistent attachment when we're kids. When that attachment gets destroyed, whether through severe abuse or profound neglect, empathy either gets buried entirely or it just completely fails to develop. Take the documented background of Jeffrey Dahmer, for example. He suffered years of intense emotional isolation and severe neglect during his crucial developmental years. Now, that neglect didn't directly force him to become violent, but it did create such a complete and total emotional detachment that the very mechanism inside a brain that stops a person from harming someone else, it simply did not exist.
Moving on to stage 3, retreat into fantasy, the incubation. And this brilliantly illustrates what's going on beneath the surface. Long before any physical crime ever takes place, there is a hidden internal timeline just ticking away. It starts with a child experiencing complete powerlessness. So what do? They retreat into a mental world where they have absolute control. In his own interviews, Ted Bundy actually described this exact internal fantasy life, and it started years before he ever committed a single crime. Over a span of years, this mental safe space morphs into escalating violent rehearsals. Then over months, the boundary between what's fantasy and what's reality starts dissolving entirely. Finally, within days, you get the direct enactment. So when the actual violence finally happens, it's almost always just playing out a script that's been rehearsed internally thousands of times.
Let's move to stage 4 and see how this builds. The mask of sanity, the execution.
This explains exactly how they fool everyone around them. These men were articulate, socially aware, and presented a genuinely charming exterior. But let's be crystal clear. This wasn't a contradiction to their dark nature. It was a performed survival tool. They used deliberate social skills specifically to blend in. I mean, think about John Wayne Gacy. He performed normalcy so incredibly well and became such an active, respected member of his local community that he literally got photographed shaking hands with First Lady Rosalind Carter. The charm is nothing but a mask, and they wear it with terrifying deliberateness.
Finally, we reach stage 5, the cycle of violence, the aftermath.
So what happens after the unthinkable is done? You would naturally expect a reaction of immense guilt, horror, or severe psychological breakdown, right? But the reality is so much more chilling.
When you look at actual FBI interview transcripts, killers didn't describe the aftermath with horror at all. Instead, they described a temporary period of profound calm and relief. The violence acted as a release valve for all that pressure built up inside their fractured psychological system, a system that had absolutely no other outlets. But as you might guess, that calm always erodes. The pressure builds right back up, and the cycle demands to repeat itself.
So, the crucial point we have to take away from all of this is a truly terrifying realization. Monsters are not born, they are made. Their psychological systems break down slowly, systematically, and almost always right in plain sight of people who simply didn't know what they were looking at or didn't know what to do about it.
Evil rarely arrives without a history. And the truth is that history is almost never as hidden as it first appears to be. Those early warning signs we talked about, they existed in every single case. The patterns were incredibly consistent across the board. By learning to read this history and recognize these specific patterns, we aren't just sitting around analyzing the past, we are actively preventing the future.
Every person who was ever harmed by someone like this crossed paths with warning signs they were never taught to recognize. This is why understanding the darkest corners of human psychology is not morbid curiosity. It is the closest thing we have to protection. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay observant, and I'll catch you in the next one.